Alibaba reports its second quarter earnings tomorrow, August the 10th. This is likely to be a pretty closely watched earnings release because Alibaba, while it's not as big in terms of market cap as some of the US tech stocks that reported earnings last month and early in this month, it is a fan favorite among value investors, and it has quite a big cult following on social media. So there's likely to be a fair bit of discussion about this earnings release tomorrow and the earnings call that comes after it. In addition to reporting all its key financial and operational metrics, Alibaba's management will also likely have some new light to shed on the spin-off program. Alibaba is in the process of spinning off its Alibaba Cloud segment, its grocery store segment, Fresh Hippo, and also a few other smaller segments. And we know that this will be happening either late this year or early next year. We don't have any dates yet. I think we might get some specific dates if we're lucky tomorrow in the second quarter earnings release. For people who are currently invested in Alibaba stock, the big question, of course, is whether the financial data and the guidance, if any, are good. For a few quarters now, Alibaba has been putting out decently good earnings releases with high growth in earnings and free cash flow. However, the showing on revenue has been somewhat weak due to the somewhat suppressed level of economic activity in China due to last year's COVID lockdowns and their lingering effects that have lasted into this year. In this video, I'm going to share what I think is going to be happening in Alibaba's upcoming earnings release. I'm not going to give any specific forecast for revenue and earnings. I haven't really looked into the matter closely enough to do that. However, I will say which figures in the coming release I expect to be fairly strong and which I expect to be comparatively weak. According to Seeking Alpha, analysts are expecting Alibaba to do $31.21 billion in revenue in the quarter about to be reported, $2 in adjusted earnings per share, and $1.43 in GAAP earnings per share. That is, earnings per share under the generally accepted accounting principles. If Alibaba hits, as in does not miss or beat, analyst estimates for revenue and earnings, we will be seeing a 1.7% revenue growth rate and a 12.6% growth rate in earnings. So without further ado, here's my take on how this is all going to play out. First things first, I think revenue is going to come in pretty strong, particularly the US dollar reported amounts, which are reported alongside the Chinese yuan. The reasons for this are twofold. China's retail sales growth was generally pretty strong in the previous quarter. There's been a lot of economic bad news about China recently, particularly as it pertains to exports and imports. Both of those categories are declining. However, domestic consumption is actually on the rise. We've seen in recent quarters growth rates in that category as high as 12% and 18.4% year over year. Therefore, I expect Alibaba's revenue growth to be relatively high, possibly ahead of what analysts expect. I also think that there are other signs that this figure will be high. Nike's apparel sales in China were very strong last quarter, and apparel is a category that Alibaba is strong in. Also, the Chinese yuan to US dollar exchange rate was pretty favorable, so Alibaba will get a little boost from that. The buybacks done in the second quarter are likely to be much larger than the first quarter buybacks. We know this for sure because when Alibaba released its first quarter earnings, it actually said that in the first few weeks of the second quarter, it had already done more buybacks in Q2 than it did in Q1. They said specifically that they had done about $2 billion worth. I think it's possible that this time around we will see $5 billion or more in buybacks having been done in the second quarter. Last quarter, the revenue growth at the international commerce segment, that is the segment that includes AliExpress, Lazada, and others, was the standout metric of the release. The growth rate was 29%, which is very excellent. I think that this time around, the growth at international commerce will still be higher than the other subsidiaries. However, I think it could slow down a little bit because a recent Chinese economic data release showed that exports continued to decline in the second quarter. Last but not least, I think we're going to get some more details about the spin-offs. As you may know, Alibaba is in the process of spinning off Alibaba Cloud, its grocery store business, and a few other segments, and I believe that the second quarter earnings release will have some data on that, including potential dates for the Alibaba Cloud spin-off. And there you have it. I think that Alibaba is basically going to put out a pretty good earnings release tomorrow. I think revenue has a good chance of beating, not as certain about earnings, but I think on the whole, the release will be pretty good. As always, definitely don't trade based on anything you heard in this video. This is just a forecast, and even if my forecast were 100% accurate, Alibaba stock has been known to trade differently from how its earnings releases would predict. That's about it for me today. Let me know how you felt about this video in the comment section, or if you liked it, leave a like, maybe share it with your friends. But anyway, that's it for me today. Happy saving.